it's Ann Lloyd, and welcome to May, also known as Anne Boleyn Month, on Royals, Rebels, and Romantics. I'm so excited to share some of the experts on Anne and what they have to say. So sit back and enjoy this episode of Royals, Rebels, and Romantics. Welcome, everyone, to this very special episode of Royals, Rebels, and Romantics. I am beyond thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Estelle Paranque, who is an associate professor at Northeastern University, London, a historian, a broadcaster, a YouTuber, an author, and just an extraordinary voice for women today and in the past. And I am thrilled to have you join us. Thank you so much, Estelle. Thank you.
Carol, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be talking to you. You're so passionate about history, and everything you do for history means a lot. So thank you for having me.
Well, we feel like we're just sort of letting you all listen in on a conversation between two people who love history and are so excited to spend time doing it. So I'd like to start by asking, what got you interested in history, in Tudor history, and particularly, you can see behind me, book about this side, Elizabeth the First and Catherine de Medici, amazing, and now Anne Boleyn. So these amazing women in history in particular.
Well, for me, it all started back in France. So I was born and bred in France. I mean, everyone can recognize my accent, but I've been living in the UK now for 15 years. So I feel like almost an identity shift, which is a bit weird. Um, but so it all started in France, and my mum has always loved history. What's so funny about my mum is that it all started with the revolution, the French Revolution. And though she loved the French Revolution and what happened, she also really loved the monarchs and the French royal families and all of this. So I got sucked into that very, very early on. I remember I loved the genealogy and I was looking into, the Capetian, the Carolingian, the Valois, the Bourbons. I knew them by heart and I just loved it. And so obviously and at school, obviously, like it kind of fueled as well, all that love and passion. But it doesn't explain the English side of it, obviously. So that happened when I wanted to do, I finished what was my baccalaureate A level, and I wanted to do history as a degree. And my dad said, no, what are you going to become, a historian? And he laughed, and now we laugh a lot about it. And so he said, like, you need to do English. And we settled for English studies. So in France, you have a degree that in English studies. So you have history, literature, linguistics, translation. So these are the big parts. And I agree because there was a history part. And that's where I got sucked into. I started with the Tudors, or maybe the Wars of the Rose, like one of the two. I started with that. And I fell in love with Elizabeth. And the fact that I had already a very strong interest in the 16th century from a French perspective. And now it was, oh my God, but okay, so they lived at the same time. And then I knew that I was going to work on that. So I finished my degree. Year after year, I started, because you have to specialize into these three things. So I started specializing in history. My dad understood that it was a real passion. And then I decided to do a master in history, but English and French history. I didn't give up translation. I kept it as a big module because I knew that I would need it uh, to do the work I wanted to do. And then it all, it can it kind of like all fell into place, if that makes sense. So then I knew that I wanted to do like I've always known that I wanted to do a PhD, but I the topic started to come to me. And obviously, I think because of my background, of what I like, it became clear that I was going to do, Franco-English history was something that I could bring something on the table. I could look at sources that were not, I mean, some people obviously have looked at, but I can look at them sometimes a bit more deeper or like, just in a way that people didn't think about them or didn't really realize how important they were, like all of these things. So that's what I've been doing throughout my whole career now of how long I've been doing that, like almost 10 years after my PhD. So quite a long time. Yeah, but oh, sorry about that. But
No,
yes,
that's wonderful. And to think about doing it that long. And I will say, just your perspective, for example, on Catherine de' Medici, which I had read about from sort of the English side of interpreting her actions. But when I read particularly your book about Elizabeth and Catherine de' Medici, I got a whole different sense of her
yeah.
with your French background, and you could open up those sources in ways I hadn't seen opened up before. So I think it's really exciting to see that bringing together of that.
Well, I think Catherine admitted, first of all, like I'm not the only historian that has kind of worked on destroying the dark legend, right? Like,
Yes, right.
so there are Jacqueline Boucher, like so many. I've got Fanny Cassandre. Yeah, there's lots of French historians that have done the work before me, and I'm so sorry if I miss any of them, and I apologize. But or, you know, even Leah Redmond Cheng, who's
Mm-hmm.
worked on Young Queens, like she's so fantastic. And I met her years ago. Like she's not new to me. She's you know and she's always been a mentor figure. So lots of all these great female historians as well, as you noticed, like
Yes.
the one I mentioned. But there was also this Mathieu, but I can't remember his last name. He was also a great historian who done that work on Catherine de' Medici. So, but I just thought, like, yes, she's misunderstood. People are saying things like they don't really understand what was going on, and it's a very complex part of history, and actually very intertwined with the English side of history. And for me, putting their lives together, their relationship at the forefront, not only explains a bit more about Catherine, but also sheds new light on Elizabeth
Yes.
and on her. Um, was she unique completely? And also not completely. Like it's just so difficult because she was ruling on her own and she would she's the virgin da da da. But there are other powerful women in the 16th century that she learned from and that and so yeah, so that's what I do. I think in Blood, Fire and Gold I bring their relationship together and their history overall together.
Yes, and we so often, and I will say I did too, think about Elizabeth with the men around her. So to think about these women like Catherine, who were her contemporaries, who were in some ways, Catherine was often the ruler in fact, if not in name, when her sons were young and stuff. So it's very
Only
interesting.
one, like
Yeah.
that's one myth. It's only one
Hmm.
because she was
Yeah.
definitely not in charge with Francis II. She was not in charge with Henry III, but she was I think she was a very influential political advisor in both cases. With Charles is way more complicated. She's definitely like, there's a regency that she more or less kind of like she's not really regent in name, but it's very close. So that lasts 3 years officially, but it lasts way longer. Even when he's crowned, he's 12 years old, and he says basically he says my mother is still in charge, and that's you can see the relationship, the personal relationship is so strong, but it's also how she kind of, but in a way it makes sense. Would you let a 12-year-old like roll like?
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry, but like, he's your son, you love him and everything, but you do want, and all the snakes at court, and you know how it works, so you're kind of like very much protective. And I don't think she does it in a way that is just because she's power hungry and all of this. I think she does it from a place of protection and care. Also because she's politically astute and she loves power. I don't see how it's wrong. If it's a man, it's completely like commended. If it's a woman, it's a bit like frowned upon. And it's the same with Elizabeth in many ways. And then later on he does change. Like, Charles like once is growing and he's like, well, I'm going to be 20 or 18 or whatever. And I would kind of like, and her at that time her power is diminishing a little. Um because she has to make room for him. And when it's Henry, then he's very much like he's a 25-year-old, like, and he's like, Mum, I'm rolling. You're in the back seat. You're in the back seat very next to me. You are still writing letters. You are still very much involved politically, diplomatically, and I'll always listen to you. But like from 1585, it's what people don't realize is or 1587, they make complete different choices. And you see how Catherine is kind of powerless, and you see that the one is in charge is and Henry, and he makes decisions that he doesn't even ask her at that time. So, like I just think that there's so much to understand about the power dynamics between her and her sons. Um, but what I love very much, if I could just summarize Elizabeth and Catherine and why they're so amazing in their own rights. Catherine, and she said it in a like more or less, I'm paraphrasing, but in her letters to Elizabeth, for her, power comes through motherhood. Because she's not the daughter of a king. She got power through her sons mostly, not even through her husband. It's not, like she's influential towards the end of his reign, and he would have, if he had lived longer, I think she would have had a more important role because he realized how intelligent and everything she was. But it didn't happen, right? So really, for her, it's through motherhood. The fact that she's mother of kings, and then she calls herself Queen Mother of France. So we always like the mother. And for Elizabeth, for her, it's like, well, no, power comes from power and comes from the fact that I am a regnant queen. I am queen, a ruler in my own right. And that for Catherine is like, because when she pursued Elizabeth, through her sons, for her it's like, but Elizabeth, surely you want to have sons, you want to have an heir, you want to become a mother, and Elizabeth like, well, you do, you needed it, I don't, and that was something inconceivable. But you see, like the kind of between the women like who did so right. I mean, how many? She had four sons. Bloody ridiculous. I mean, five. Louis died, but young. But four sons. That went that reached more or less adulthood, or you know what I mean, teenage years, and then Elizabeth, who didn't have any child, but ruled in her own right. It's incredible. I think for me, it's just incredible the way power is viewed and power is seen, and how complex and complicated it can be.
Well, that's really true. And this comes really to a head as the two women are sort of negotiating. And as you say, Catherine wants to be Elizabeth's mother in law and sort of mother her as well. Whereas Elizabeth resists that a little bit because she's on her own and she's on her throne. And, it's just a fascinating relationship and different ways of viewing power and where it comes from.
Absolutely. And and it is funny to see that kind of dance that they do for years. Um, in a way, you do understand why Catherine gets frustrated in the end. Like I mean, it's quite obvious.
Yes, yes, yes. But it is fascinating to watch and also to realize the influence and the power these women are representing in a time that we always think the men are always in charge. But in fact, you do see women like these two who are great examples of standing up and speaking their own truths, and it's great to see, even though they can't ever quite come together, but it's really fun to see them negotiate with each other in their letters. So I
Yeah.
do want to thank you for that, because that's a whole different way of seeing Catherine and seeing Elizabeth. Like you say, it's a new way of seeing Elizabeth in her interactions with a woman. I mean, you see Elizabeth with Mary Queen of Scots, but those interactions are very different than her interactions with Catherine de Medici.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, they were almost like raised as being rivals from the start. It's not the case for Elizabeth and Catherine. They're gonna become, well, they became rival. They started as like kind of rivals, and then trying to make peace and being friends, and then being rivals again. But for Mary Stuart and Elizabeth, it's a total different story. Catherine never wanted the English throne for herself. She wanted it for her sons.
Right, right. But it wasn't a direct Elizabeth threat. So I mean, I just feel like they
No,
had
she
a
wanted an
really
alliance. She wanted an alliance. But obviously Mary Stuart could not offer an alliance to Elizabeth. So I mean, like in a way, and it's always complicated when it comes to Elizabeth and the Catholic community of the time, because for some of them, it's very hard to recognize Elizabeth's legitimacy, given what happened to her mother, Anne Boleyn. And while Catherine does recognize, like, I mean, she did recognize Elizabeth's legitimacy. Henry II, her husband, did as well. The ones who didn't were Francis II, mostly because he was influenced by Mary Stuart and the Guises, who were. It's not just a question of being ultra Catholic. I don't think it's about power. It's about the fact that she had a claim to that throne. And imagine if we remove Elizabeth, let's say like that, it was completely accepted by everyone that she imagine she had remained a bastard, never put back on the succession from an English point of view. She would have had a very hard time to get the throne. That would have been impossible if her father had never put her back on the succession, never put her and only put back Mary. And if we had gone back to Catholic, like let's follow the heir to the throne would have never been. I'm not saying they would not have tried a coup d'etat, maybe, the Protestants from Edward's reign, but it would have been much harder, and the heir to the throne would have been Mary Stuart. And Mary Stuart would have ended up on the English throne and the French one, period.
right.
Right? So it is a complicated relationship from the start between those two women.
Yes. Yes. And the fact that Henry put Elizabeth back in the succession, but did not make her legitimate, continued that very complicated.
Blurry line where, yeah,
Yeah.
where Elizabeth is constantly fighting for her legitimacy. Even,
Hmm.
in her speeches and stuff, I work, I mean, more academically, I worked so much on her words for years. And she has to kind of almost constantly
Right.
fight for her legitimacy. So, yeah,
Yes. And I think just to further the point we were making earlier, I think Catherine de Medici believed if Elizabeth produced a son, that would help with her
yeah,
legitimacy. That's one of the ways Catherine
yeah,
gained power was having her son. So that would help
yeah.
Elizabeth.
And for Elizabeth was like, first of all, it's not sure that I can have a son. Second, it's not sure I can have children. Third, it's not sure that I would survive a childbirth. So for her, it was just like, what you're telling me it makes no sense.
Right, right. It's just
Yeah,
so interesting. So interesting. So we have this and we mentioned the Anne Boleyn. So let's go back to that because that is, and I will say, this is the book we're really going to be focusing on, this fabulous book. You can see I've spent just a little time reading it, but this is so wonderful. So we look at Anne Boleyn again from her French perspective
yeah,
and how she really was brought up in these two very sophisticated European courts. So she was born in England, probably at Blickling, but as about a 12-year-old, right? Went to Margaret of
yes.
Austria and then went to the French court. So tell us a little bit about what it meant for Anne to have this incredibly sophisticated upbringing in the French court.
I mean, it makes her so different. I mean, we have to realize here that it's a very good power move from Thomas Boleyn. What he managed to achieve here from his own network that obviously comes with Cardinal Wolsey, but also his own personal touch as when each time he was made an ambassador, he nailed that position. He never let down his master Wolsey, and so he never let down Henry VIII. So I think here we have to give him massive credit. And he saw an opportunity for his daughter, Anne Boleyn, and he sent her first at Margaret of Austria's court, Mechlin. And there she learned French, and also I think so I don't cover this that much in my book because my book is really about the French, but let's pause a moment and remember that here she's meeting a very powerful woman. Again, she's governor of the Spanish Netherlands. So here again, she at 12 years old, let's not argue about her age and let's not have the big debate. But for me, it's 500 or 501, like the around that time that she was born. You can be 502, but I don't buy the 507 or earlier than that. And she is confronted, well, she experienced the court of a woman in power from the very start. We know that Margaret is very pleased with Anne. She finds her sweet, she finds her intelligent, she learns quickly. We know that because she writes to Thomas Boleyn and thank him for his daughter. Then, because of the political situation, everything's going to change. It's going to be a big turmoil. So there was a massive, Spanish, Anglo-Spanish alliance, but then everything turns around. It's always complicated, right? The European politics. And then they're trying to have an alliance with France. So they're gonna Henry VIII is gonna decide to marry his sister Mary Tudor to Louis XII of France to make an alliance, and obviously that complicates things from the Habsburg perspective. So Charles V and Margaret of Austria, and so Anne Boleyn is gonna be, Thomas Boleyn is thinking, oh my God, like I need to put her in another court where she can keep learning, but also keep seeing things for him. And he has no problem really securing a place for her with Mary Tudors. Like that's not a problem, right? Again, his patron is Wolsey. There's no problem. So he managed to do that. But Anne Boleyn is gonna, she's late. She can't arrive on time. So it's Mary Boleyn, her sister, is gonna go to France first. But then Louis XII died. And Mary Tudor goes back to England with Mary Boleyn. But here, what we don't know how it happened. We know it happened. Thomas Boleyn managed to convince the new French king, Francis I, to keep Anne in his wife's, court as a lady in waiting in the wife's household, Queen Claude. And Queen Claude is about the same age. I think she's born 1499. It's quite the same age as Anne. She's yeah, it's they're probably the same age. Um, and so here Anne is like with someone of her age, with other very important French women, noble women. And here it's a total new experience. Not only that, but it's what I discuss with in my book. What we never really discuss it in anywhere. Is like how Anne is well traveled. And she's going to Provence with Claude, with Louise of Savoy. So again, other very strong women. And that's insane, Carol, because like it makes her completely, when we talked about like how it's going to impact her, it impacts her culturally, it impacts her intellectually, it impacts her emotionally, it impacts, there are so many. It's the period of her life where obviously we don't know much because she was a nobody. But what we know, well, there's a few things we know. If you follow Claude, you follow Anne. We know Claude went to the south of France to welcome back Francis I, who had won his first campaign in Italy. So we know that Anne. So Lyon, Toulouse, Marseille, that's the Mediterranean. That's amazing. Henry VIII has never seen that. So it's amazing. And then obviously she kind of goes back, and then she's in the Château de la Loire, Amboise. She stays. We're not always sure where she is because in the household we don't have them year by year. Some of them are lost. So I tried to see if she was with Margaret of Angoulême, but it was very hard to find. We can't know for sure. What we know for sure is that Thomas Boleyn knew things about Claude that he wouldn't know without someone close to Claude. So again, I discussed that in my book, and I think that's also very interesting because it tells you the relationship between Anne and her father and how she worked. And when I say as a spy, not as a spy like in a nasty way, as an informant,
Mhm.
like trying to give him an advantage. And it did, because in 1518 he's French, he's an ambassador at the French court. So it's very useful for him to have some information that his daughter can give him. But also, when you think about Anne, it gives her everything. Like, it gives her so much education, but also life experience that would make her very different when she comes back and when she came back.
Well, she's seen the way things really work. So,
Yeah.
not just from the outside looking in at the royal family or looking in at the monarchy, she's been on the inside.
Yeah, but also, yes, but she's been on the inside in a very different court where Francis, womanizer, whatever, can have a scandalous court. But Claude was not always with him, so that I don't think Anne experienced that much. But also Anne realized how much respect he had for women because people always like tell me, but Francis was horrible. He had lots of mistresses and da da da. Yes, he did. But he also, yes, yes, oh, yes, on his wedding night, he probably like did awful things or just before, whatever. Awful things on a modern standard. But I just think it's because we don't have the records of other kings doing that same thing, but it doesn't mean they didn't. That's one thing. And second thing, Francis the First never executed one of his wives, never disrespected her by having a mistress. Like he never upset Claude. He never did anything outrageous in front of her, like I mean, in her presence. So I mean, ladies in waiting. So and he was so respect like his mother was so important. So you had to get a very powerful woman. And Margaret of Angoulême, who was not a queen, was also very much influential. So here you have a very young woman, 15, 16, whatever, until 20, that is going to see. So she experienced a very strong woman in Mecca,
Yeah.
completely in charge. Then she realized that even when there's a man, women can be extremely powerful with a strong agency. So you're right, she see from the inside, but from inside of a French court. And I feel like it distorted our views on how it actually worked in England because Henry VIII is a very different type of man. At the same time, very similar to Francis, very, egotistical and all of that, But but I don't think Francis is a narcissist. And I think Henry VIII is. And I think Henry VIII is borderline psychopath, and a tyrant. I don't think Francis the First is. So I think she completely confused how things work. And I want to say that because I think you can't really understand Anne Boleyn if you don't understand where she comes from, what she experienced. It's almost she doesn't have a good way of reading the English court, and she thinks she does.
That's a really interesting point because she certainly was able to navigate the French court successfully. I mean, first in Margaret of Austria's court, she was very well received
Yeah.
by Margaret, but then she comes over and she is with Claude until she's called home. So Claude doesn't ever send her away
No,
and she's taking
exactly.
her, she's successful
And
there.
we know that she's successful as well because Catherine de' Medici tells Elizabeth, so it's in Blood, Fire, and Gold. I love how my two
Mm-hmm.
books are very linked.
Yes.
Tells Elizabeth the First, we should be friends because your mother was a good friend of French people and of French ladies, and notably Renée de France, who was Claude's sister and much younger. So again, you see, you have someone. Anne Boleyn is extremely. Anne Boleyn has lots of problems. Like I'm not because people think that I think that she's perfect. Absolutely not. I just don't think that she's as bad as some people are making at all. I don't buy it because she's so loyal. Once you are a friend, she's extremely loyal. She's extremely caring. She did a lot for the poor. She voiced her concerns about the dissolution of monasteries. She showed high how important her religion was. Like she's just very pious. People don't think that she is. And but yes, if you're not, if she doesn't like you, she has that kind of not nasty, but she's tough. She's going to be tough on you. Yes, she's not going to be nice. But at the same time, I mean, who is? I mean, I don't know. Like, I just don't understand the hatred she can get. And I'm just thinking about this, Carol, because, as you know, I have lots of social media. And as soon as I make a video on Anne Boleyn, she gets so much hatred. And I'm like, that's so weird. I mean, so much love as well. She has lots of fans, but she gets so much hatred, and it's always because of the propaganda against her. When, or yes, like she didn't treat well Catherine of Aragon and Princess Mary, but that, yeah, of course. Like they wanted the same man. And for me, she's not a homewrecker. Henry VIII, he's the homewrecker. He
Hmm.
decided to go for another woman. And off. If he had said, no, I don't want to get married, um, that would have been, you see what I mean? So obviously, and he's the one who pursued her. This idea that Anne pursued Henry VIII is ludicrous, absolutely untrue. So yeah, so as you can see, I'm very passionate about that.
No, and I agree that her story is told by other people in a way that positions her as the homewrecker and positions her in pursuing him and all these things.
It's not
um
fair.
it's not
Absolutely not
fair
fair.
because
Absolutely not fair.
you see her being so successful in these two very sophisticated courts and so well liked and making alliances with these very powerful women who respect her,
Yeah.
including Marguerite. You mentioned Marguerite of Angoulême, and as well as Claude and Louise of Savoy. I mean, just an extraordinary women. And then she's also, I've understood from some of my research, and correct me if I'm wrong, that her French was so good when there were English ambassadors, she could have done some translating as well because she knew the language both of English and French. Is that true? Did you find anything
Well,
about
I
that?
mean, that's an interesting because some people would argue that at the time, Henry VIII or Catherine of Aragon had very good, like if you think about the field of Glove of Gold and you'll see, I but I would argue that yes, they probably had a good level of French. It doesn't mean they are fluent. And there's a
Mhm.
very different, like, so when I hear Stern saying that they would not need someone translating, so Anne would not need to be there. I'm, gosh, I'm gonna sound so nasty, and I'm so sorry. It's not what I mean, but like, um, let's be honest. I know some people who can read French and have a very good level of French, but I'll take them in a conversation in France, just with French people. And I can assure you, like, as soon as everyone starts talking and it's very fast, they will get lost. I know because as soon as I start talking faster to them, they're lost. It doesn't mean that their French is not good. It means it's not fluent. And I think it's exactly what would have happened to Henry VIII and Catherine of Aragon because their French was probably very good. But as soon it's not like they practiced all the time. It's not like mostly they were speaking the language in England. And to be fair, let's give Catherine some credit here. She was managing so many languages and she was completely fluent on English and Spanish. So, and have a very strong, very, very strong level in French. So what a woman when you think about it. But to be completely fluent and to be able to pick up absolutely everything and the jokes and the references because that's another thing that people don't and even me like and it might have been a bit of a struggle with Anne. The difference is like she was completely immersed in something so rural and stuff. I think she would have understood some of the for me for example like a cultural there's some cultural jokes that I don't understand even now like because I didn't grow up. If you make a reference it's the same. I to be fair it must be the same with you if you're in England and someone makes a joke
Mhm.
about a show that was 20 years ago you speak English, but it would be like, "Phew," right?
Mhm.
But the difference is that I think with Anne, though, maybe someone would have explained it to her if it was something common that a joke, or something,
Mhm.
a reference that would come up a lot, at court.
Mhm.
So that's the thing. So I do believe that when I see the criticism of saying, well, but Henry VIII and Catherine, they did speak French. Yes. Do you think they spoke French at the same level as Anne? You're delusional. You are, because she was there. It's completely different. And again, I'm asking you the question. I know so many people that are good, they're excellent at reading, listening, understanding. As soon as you're in conversation, even with me one to one, I never speak fast. If I start speaking fast, they're gone. And I don't think it would have happened with Anne.
right, because she
I think she would
lived.
have kept up. I think
Yes.
she was used to it. I think
Mhm.
from my experience, the first year when you're in another country, I had migraines because of it. Between being between the two languages all the time. After a year or two, you adjust so quickly to the point now that I can text in French, talk to you in English, and have my TV in French. Obviously, all of this didn't exist for Anne, but what I'm saying is that I think she had to be at that level. It's not like she had a choice. She had to be at that level.
Yes.
And so yes, so all a very long answer. I'm so sorry, Carol, but I just wanted to because I know some people who've argued with me about the fact that, oh come on, we didn't need Anne to translate. I bet that they did. You know, not everything. It doesn't mean that they could not have a discussion on their own. It just means that the depth of the conversation would have been a bit less than if Anne was there and maybe she was able to say, well, actually, it's what he meant or what she meant, or may I translate this or explain this reference. Do you see what I mean? Like,
Yes.
yeah,
And especially if there's more than one person speaking,
it
it's
goes so
easy to
fast.
get lost and it's so fast. But she's
It's
used to that. She's used to these same people speaking quickly to her at the same time. So she knows how to follow it, where, of course,
absolutely
no visitor would,
no,
you know.
and it is she must have helped as well with her fat. Again, Thomas Boleyn was, very good as well. It's not, or the other, I'm not saying they're not good. I'm just saying that you can easily see a situation where a dinner where it's no longer an audience, a official audience. I'm sure official audience, you speak way more slowly, all of this, fine. You can have a one-to-one, everyone has a turn. That's not where you get confused, is it? No.
Right.
But you're at dinner, and that's where there's the wine going, and that's where everything and so I don't I do see Anne being able to handle it more than Henry and Catherine, or her father Thomas, or anyone who was an English ambassador of the French court. So yes, so to answer your question,
Well, but that's good to know because what happens when she's called back to England then is she brings this French immersive experience and
yeah,
she's described as being more French than English
I
in
know,
England.
I
So
know,
that
yeah,
comes with her and makes her
and all her life.
stand out. Yes,
She's a
right.
Francophile. In my book, I call her French substitute princess. Um,
Hmm.
Not everyone agrees with me, not everyone understands what I mean by that. So let me explain. I mean that once I really started to be interested in her, the French see a way of putting their agenda through her because they know that she will favor them. They know who she is. And so she becomes. They don't really need to put one of theirs, like a household, one of France's daughter, because they know that she will do. And also, like, let's not forget that Henry and Anne, I mean, I'm going to call it love story. It's not love because I don't believe that Henry can love anyone. But you see what I mean? Like, he chose her. He chose her. And they're thinking, well, it can work at our own advantage. So, yes, you're right. And she's totally different. She comes back. She's like no one else. But she has no interest. She just wants to marry well. She comes back. She wants to marry well. She's a lady in waiting to Catherine of Aragon. She's very honored. I think she does. She probably does a good job of like. I mean, until Henry gets between these two women have no reason to dislike one another. They have no reason at all. Catherine of Aragon, I'm sure, what was very pleased with Anne. I mean, Anne was, or maybe she was a bit annoyed that she did it the French way, or that maybe Anne was a bit like, oh, you know, I know what it's like. I've done it in France for, I don't, maybe, but to be fair, I don't even see Anne being like this that much. I mean, she's how she's portrayed in all the movies, like all these bad depiction of her where but I don't see it. I really don't see it. So I think just very interesting when you look at, yeah, when you look at Anne and her French relations and how she's going to favor the French and how for her it's so important because she's not bringing a dynastic alliance like Catherine was. So she relies on two things: her relationship with the fact that Henry likes her or loves her. Let's not get into that. The not the intimacy, the relationship. She relies on that. That's why she gets so jealous. And the Catherine, well, I mean, whatever, do whatever you want, mate, because I'm Spanish princess, so you can sleep whoever. You know what? There's a very different here because when people say, "Oh my God, she's so jealous," she's not jealous. She relies on that relationship. If he's no longer interested in her, then what? So that's one thing. The second thing she relies on is the French alliance. What she's bringing, the fact that they trust her, she trusts them, she favors them, and it's a good, and it's not. It's the other very big court from Europe. It's not.
Mhm.
So in a way, she feels like, oh, but yeah, Catherine brought you like the Spanish alliance. I can bring you the French. So she feels like politically strong.
Mhm.
And she was. She was for such a long time. I mean, you look 1527 to 1533 when she gives birth to a daughter. They are backing her. 6 years of her favoring them, of them favoring her, and Henry being happy about it, very happy about it. So they are backing her. Then she gives birth to a daughter, and that's where it gets even for the French are like, but some of them are also not sure about her. Like some ambassadors don't are not really sure. They might not like her on a personal level, but some of them really did. I mean, Jean du Bellay really liked Anne, but not in a weird way. He just really liked her, respected her, thought she was highly intelligent, and he fought for her. He fought for her to be recognized as Queen of England by the Pope until 1534. He fought for her. And I call it in my book, the impossible mission, right? But but the one who screwed over Jean du Bellay in his quest of making her recognized as Queen of England is Henry the Eighth. Because Henry, again, it's his ego. And he wants to break with her. He thinks that, in the end, he doesn't, he thinks the Pope should not tell him what to do. And so he's not, I mean, Jean de Billet got backstabbed by others, not just obviously Henry VIII, but Henry VIII played a big role in the fact that Anne would never be recognized by the Pope. And no one really talks about this as well.
Right. Yes, because by the time Henry had the chance to be supreme head of the church,
That's what he
that's
wants.
that's what he wants. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what he wants. And it doesn't matter what happens to Anne.
Right. So as time goes on, and although we know Elizabeth is going to grow up and be great, everyone really wanted Anne to have a son, including Anne, and
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
of course, but as time goes on and she doesn't, when it comes to her downfall, what pieces do you see where the French really pull back on their support?
They pulled back before.
Okay.
They never, to be fair, I don't think they realized that I don't think they thought she was in real danger. However, Francis the First is going to show that he has to follow his own political agenda. It's not, he, she becomes like, before she was an asset and now she's a problem.
Mhm.
Like, it's like, okay, before she could advance, the French political agenda. Now she's a problem in us. Like, not that they want to get rid of her, absolutely not. But they're just like, gosh, like backing her becomes very difficult. And also like Francis the First never really approved the break with Rome. So for him, when he supported her to be recognized by the Pope. So for him, in an ideal world, annulment of Catherine of Aragon's marriage to piss off as well Charles V that he bloody hates. And then Anne Boleyn being recognized, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like for him, that's the only way. And when she gives birth to Elizabeth, he's a bit upset. Like disappointed, but at the same time, everyone thinks, okay, well, she gave a, healthy daughter, right? So like she could give a healthy boy. Like it's not like she struggled. Let's not forget that Catherine of Aragon struggled for years before being able to give a healthy daughter. So here that we have a different
Mhm.
uh, situation. Her the first time she gives a healthy girl. So people are like, okay, she can give a healthy. Even Henry VIII is like, okay, she can. I mean, he's disappointed, but he's like, like that could work. That could still work. That could still be fun. And that's why it's ups and downs from 1533 to 1536, right? Because he still believes that something good can happen. You know what I mean, sis. I'm not saying having a boy is something you should understand what I'm saying.
Right.
Like, yeah, thank you. And but for Francis, it becomes more and more complex, and the Catholics are putting so much pressure on him, and they don't. And Jean du Bellay becomes Bishop of Paris in 1532. So Jean du Bellay is a big supporter of Anne, but they're like, okay, but and he loves reformed ideas, but that's what I'm saying. Like people play the game. They play the game to go up, right? So they play the game. But Jean du Bellay's patron is Margaret of Angoulême, so it's very interesting as well, like the dynamic between Jean du Bellay, Anne Boleyn, and Margaret. But that could be a total new episode, Carol. Otherwise, we could spend hours and hours. But here, Francis is pressured to send someone who's more, as a French ambassador who's more on the side of Catholicism. So he's gonna send Chabot, and Chabot is not pro, and he doesn't rock. He's like, I'm sorry, like, what is this country? You have two queens? That doesn't work. So you only have one queen. That's Catherine of Aragon. So no, we're not gonna offer marriage to Elizabeth. We're gonna offer marriage to Marie and the Dauphin, because why would we want Elizabeth? And Anne then feels betrayed. She's like, "Oh my God. So if you don't recognize me, my daughter, what have I been doing this whole time for you?" Do you say like and at the same time, I think Francis, so that's when, in a way, you can call it the betrayal. That was for her a betrayal. But by doing that, Francis, by sending Chabot, I mean, and Chabot acting the way he did, they did kind of like send a signal that she's on her own. She's no longer this French substitute princess. That and that's when she, her life, her damn, like, like she becomes a big liability, and she becomes in danger. Where, all right then. And I think that when in January 1536, then everything goes so bad for her, because you have Chabot, difficult relationship, the fact that the French are like saying, well, Elizabeth, no, we don't want a marriage with her. Like that's a betrayal. But then it gets worse, because she doesn't realize it. She thinks that the death of Catherine of Aragon means great, everyone now is going to recognize me as queen. Well, no, babe. Now you're in such a big danger, because before he couldn't go anywhere else. He could, he had two wives already. In the eyes of the Catholic, it was crazy, but he couldn't get a third one. He couldn't get rid of her. And now it's like, and then but at the time she's pregnant, so she's safe, but then she has a miscarriage, and then it's like, okay, and then Henry VIII is completely, pulls away, gets more, and we push more and Jane in his arms, and then it's like, yeah, what am I doing? Am I gonna stay with? And also, I think he just didn't like the fact that, as I said before, when we discussed Anne Boleyn, very intelligent, um, but she had an idea about everything, and she loved, and she felt like she was at the French court where women had a say, because she saw that. She saw Louise of Savoy telling her son, "Oh, I don't think that way." It doesn't mean that he would go with what his mom was saying or what his sister was saying, but he always listened. And I think in Anne Boleyn's vision of a woman being a queen, she was like, she had a right to say what she wanted. And Henry's like, no, I don't like this at all. Um, And so she gets annoying, more and more annoying. She calls them out for the dissolution of monastery. She's saying that they're doing that for money, and she wants to help the poor. And she gives her personal, that's one thing we don't talk enough about Anne Boleyn. She has lots of debts at her when she dies. Do you know why she has lots of debts? First of all, because she gave a lot away, but also because she had renters like every um noble, and if they couldn't pay, well, she let them get away with it. Not everyone was like that.
Right. Right. And we
Uh,
don't talk about her
no,
charity or her good work or her helping people or
no,
her
absolutely
advocating
not. But like
with,
here, I'm talking about like she has land, and when people were like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like we couldn't make it." Okay, well, next month. The fuck? Do you know many nobles? Oh, sorry, it's. Do you know many nobles who'd be like, "Yeah, okay, fine, you'll pay next month. You'll pay me when you can." That's Anne Boleyn.
Mhm.
That's Anne Boleyn. Anne Boleyn, when she's arrested, when she's in the tower, she talks about other people than her. That's Anne Boleyn. She's concerned about her mother, who's going to lose two children. She's concerned about the men who are being falsely accused and are going to die. She tried to set them at her trial. She said, like, okay, fine, I'm going to die. He wants me dead. But please, please, please save these men who have done nothing wrong. She thinks about her daughter. She's talked to Matthew Parker at Chaplin. She wants her to be safe. That's Anne Boleyn. This
Right.
monster, homewrecker. Da, da. She's trying to save other people than her. She has concerns for others. I mean, honestly, sorry, but
No, but that is a really good reminder because in the days, in her final few days, she is concerned about other people and trying, as you say, even at her trial to say, okay, just take me then. Let all these men
exactly.
go. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and that's beautiful.
Right. Right.
Not
So,
not everyone is like that.
and we do lose that part of her, I think.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want her to fit into this homewrecker. I mean, some people like I can't believe that some people would believe she was, guilty. I love she's everything, but not stupid. She would have never ever risked. My God, and the accusations. I mean, the worst one, isn't it? When it's all in my book again that you've read
Mhm.
but like when they told her like what 2 weeks or 3 weeks after giving birth to Elizabeth, she's apparently in Hampton Court having sex with Henry Norris in the gardens, and I'm like, so
Right.
she's still bleeding. She could barely move. Like let's giving birth is not something that you snap back, especially your first one.
Right.
Like I mean, some women get better. I have some friends who have 4 kids, and they do like the last one, like, oh yeah, I'm fine. But usually you it wrecks you a bit, and the last thing you have on your mind is having intimate relationship with your husband or and so anyone else, right? Like
Especially
I mean,
anyone else. Well, and
and
she
you
would
would
never
not
have
do it in the gardens of Hampton Court.
and she would not have been alone. She would never have been alone, especially right
That,
after birth, when
that's insane.
so many women
Can you imagine
died right
like
after birth. Yeah.
12 men accusing her of things, and it's like they don't care about the details. They don't even care about making it plausible. And that's
Right.
where she says, like, okay, he wants me dead. But these men are
Yes.
innocent.
Well, yes. And she's so intelligent, she would have been able to see through what they were trying, this picture they're trying to paint of
Oh,
her.
of course, of course. I mean, there's no doubt. Like, I think she understood it was a foregone conclusion. When,
Yes.
when people were saying stuff like this, that they didn't even pay attention to the dates and they just wanted you out.
Yes. Yes. So hastily put together and so that she's pleading for others. So we have this arc of her as this intelligent, savvy, politically aware woman who somehow gets painted into someone totally different when she gets to Henry VIII's court, which of course doesn't make sense. So she is this intelligent, politically savvy woman the whole way through, which I think is really interesting because we see that with her daughter, although they were not able to spend very much time together.
Unfortunately.
you do see Elizabeth as intelligent, politically savvy, with this facility for languages sort of carrying on.
Yeah.
Um, and in this way, and you mentioned earlier when we talked a little bit about Catherine de' Medici and her wanting to have this strong relationship with Elizabeth because her mother had had a strong relationship with France. And so it's just interesting to me that in France, Catherine de' Medici recognized
Anne
Anne
Boleyn.
Boleyn.
Anne
Yes,
Boleyn is a difficult one for France because she's she was one of them without being she was raised there,
right.
but she wasn't one of them. But she was. But she wasn't. But she was. So it was a very difficult, and she did what was considered quite crazy. Um, getting the throne first. Like, like there was a queen before, like so she's a complex figure, but when you really look at the French sources, there's lots of praise as well. And she's remembered in the French sources.
Yes. And I think that's something we lose in many of the stories of her is sort of her international reach. Um,
Absolutely.
that she was recognized, as you say, especially in France, praised, appreciated for her talents and for all she had done,
Yeah,
even into the next generation with Catherine de' Medici, which I just think
absolutely.
is a really lovely thing for Elizabeth to hear, whether she, acted on it really or not, but that
Yeah,
her mother had this reputation in France.
yeah,
Um, Complicated as it may have been politically, but
yeah.
that there were people because the reputation in England
I
was
mean,
very tough too.
some people did criticize Anne Boleyn, obviously. There was a pamphlet that was printed
Hmm.
70s, can't remember the date now, but by Gabriel de Sarsonnet, who said like Anne Boleyn was Jezebel.
Hmm.
When Elizabeth heard that, she asked Catherine and Charles for this, for this to be stopped and censored and destroyed, and they did. They did.
Yes.
They did right away, and they apologized. So I'm not saying that the Catholics in France were so Anne Boleyn as them. Absolutely not. You see, Mary Stuart, the Guises, their partisans were obviously not, you know.
Right.
But there was a political goal, the English throne. So I think
Hmm.
that you cannot completely forget the fact that the reason why Anne Boleyn got lots of hatred from that part of the people in France was because that they wanted to put Mary Stuart on the throne. So
Right.
that was not just because of her, if that makes
Right.
sense.
Right. That was the path to getting rid of Elizabeth. The more they could
Exactly.
paint her mother that way. So, and that
Exactly.
and that Elizabeth could turn to Catherine de' Medici and Charles and say, "I need this to stop," and they would. So there's still that
Exactly.
relationship. So the whole, I mean, one of the things I came away with so many things from this book. I just, as you see, again, so many tabs. I could have just tabbed every page. Um, but the whole her international savvy, how she understood all of the international workings, which were so complex and so complicated, and partly by being firmly on the French side rather than the Habsburg side for obvious
Yeah.
reasons.
Yeah.
Her their pulling back really did affect her backing. So while she didn't have the Spanish family,
Absolutely.
suddenly her French backing was gone as well.
Yeah, that's everything fell, right? Fell
Mhm.
apart. He lost their backing. Catherine of Aragon died. She had a miscarriage. Done deal. Like that's the end of
Yes.
Anne Boleyn. That's the fall. But,
Yes.
but to be fair, none of them would have imagined what was going to happen. And it happened so quickly.
Yes.
End of April, 19th of May. She's gone.
Hmm.
It's not
Right.
enough time to get even Chapuis. I mean, he said at the end of April, like, I have no idea what's going on. The Privy Council is keep meeting up. Henry and Anne were supposed to go to Rochester, but and Anne keeps waiting for Henry. So you have to imagine that you have that woman who's had a miscarriage, who knows that there's another woman sleeping with her husband or being interested, like maybe
Hmm.
I don't know, like there's something. She knows what's going on. And her, she's getting ready because she was told that she would go to Rochester with him. And instead, is not to go to Rochester. She sees the people coming and arresting her. So like there's not enough time between the arrest, 2nd of May, 19th of May, for France to get the news, do something about it, plead for her. She's gone.
Right.
17 days. She's
Yeah.
gone in 17 days. That drives me nuts. Like, it's like there's not enough time for anyone to tell them what's happened. And like there's obviously Lancelot de Carle, who's the secretary to the French ambassador, who's going to record and witness the
Mm-hmm.
execution. And he wrote this magnificent thing of life and death of Anne Boleyn. It's censored in England. He goes to France and said it, and but Henry VIII goes mad and said that cannot be printed, and Francis doesn't want to have a problem, so he agrees it will not be printed, but it's circulating at court, and it will be printed later on in France
Mm-hmm.
because it is crazy what he did. This is unheard of.
Right.
He beheaded his queen, a queen that he crowned
Yes.
at Westminster Abbey with St. Edward's crown.
Yes. I think we forget
Look,
because we've known it for so long. We know the end from the beginning. We forget
the
how
shock.
astonishing it was
It
and the
is. It's
shock.
horrible. And also it give and then and realize it doesn't stop. So at first they know that he's not treating well Cardinal Wolsey. He doesn't, but people are like, oh my God, this man, like whatever you think of him, this man had ruled in many ways, or had
Yes.
huge political agency, let's put it that way, for a long time. He was a father figure, he's gone. Then he decided, yeah, she's gonna be beheaded. Never heard of. Then Cromwell. Then Catherine Howard. But then you look at Margaret Pole, like all these years, like he's a bloody monster. And I don't know how anyone can justify his reign. Even you looked at all the women 7 women died under his reign. 7. Look at Henry VII. How many women he executed? None.
Right.
That's
Yes.
insane. He's
It
insane. He's a monster. And everyone is still praising him and saying that he was not that bad because he's a monster. Absolute monster. There's no other way to see him. And 17 days. I know why it went so fast. He didn't want anyone to intervene.
No, and he didn't want to bother with finding evidence because it didn't matter or investigating anything
Oh,
because it
and then
didn't
he just
matter.
doubled down on the fact that she did that. But no one bought it. No one
Hmm.
in France bought it. I mean,
Right.
come on. Anne Boleyn, being that you might not like her and stuff, but she was ambitious. She wanted power. You really think she would have risked everything for sex?
Right. Right.
She had a
Right.
brain, right?
Yes.
Like,
And people sometimes resented that about her, that she knew so
absolutely.
much and she spoke out so much and she was so intelligent and thought she was,
Drives me nuts. It drives
yeah.
me.
Thank you so much. Because the great thing is we have Anne Boleyn remembered the way she should be, and her story told in a way that we can get the reality of her back. So thank you so much, Estelle, for joining us and coming on and sharing your book. Thank you for your book and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so, so much for having me.
It's been wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Royals, Rebels, and Romantics. I am going to ask you a question. Please leave us a rating, share with a friend. Let me hear from you what you'd like to hear from Royals, Rebels, and Romantics in the future. Thank you so much for your ongoing support as we look at all the ways that history shows us what's possible.